debt is inevitable. For me, debt is inevitable in the African context because of a number of reasons. Can it be because of the developmental needs that we have? But I think the most important thing is for the most important takeaway from that statement is that debt is probably not going away, so we need to find a way of making it less painful than it is now. The second statement I picked yesterday was the one that says that challenges are not new to Africa. So if they are not new to Africa, probably they would not disappear now. So again, the same principle that we probably need to find a way of dealing with that that will probably be more beneficial to the continent. The other statement says that debt in itself is not a problem, but the problem is where debt is coming from, how it is acquired, the source of debt, and the costs. And this is, in most cases, where the problem is coming from. So one of the presenters yesterday then offered a solution. He says that what we need to do is to build accountability structures and to make debt management a democracy activity. And I think that is where this study comes in to say that how do we make sure that the debt management decisions are made in such a way that they will in the long run encourage debt sustainability in the continent. Please. Okay, this one was just to give you an indication of what the status of the debt is. But I think for me, the most important one will be the last point, which shows that the number of countries that are in debt distress or going into debt distress has been increasing, and we are currently sitting at 23, if not more, from 9 in 2012. This is an indication that Africa is actually going into more unsustainable debt, which is not a palatable position. Can move on? So what is the solution? Like I've indicated earlier on, the solution could come in different packages, but I believe one of the most critical things that we need to be looking at as Africa is to make sure that we have prudent debt management practices, is to make sure that we build the strong governance to ensure that whatever debt contract that we sign or that we get into, at least we have the required controls. On that note, then, I believe all of you might know that Afrodad has issued a very good instrument for us to look at. It's called the African Borrowing Charter. It was published in 2018. It gives a very brief and watertight practices that maybe some African government may borrow and implement. And a similar document was also published by IMF in 2015, which only talks about designing legal frameworks. And we all know that governance can only be made possible if we put it in our legal instruments. So the main issue there is for us to build the proper governance that is needed. So that is the position of this paper today. Can we move on, please? I think we skipped a slide. Okay, so debt management frameworks can be done in two main ways. The first leg of it is to make sure that we have the comprehensive legal framework. The second one is to make sure that we have well-defined institutional framework. On the legal framework, the first thing that is important there to note is that the law needs to indicate whether the country has got a borrowing power and who those power lies in which office those powers lies in. And we find that best practice actually calls for this authority to be defined in the Constitution and also to be defined in the secondary and the primary laws. So it is not unusual to see a country saying that, defining the borrowing powers in the Constitution and then operationalizing those powers in the primary and the secondary laws. What is also important for the law to cover is the purpose of borrowing, and this is a control that we need to put in place to make sure that the country is borrowing for purposes that for good purposes, so that people don't just use their discretions to borrow and then the country will be in trouble, as we are seeing in some of the African countries today. The other thing that is also very important is to put a maximum or a restriction on the amount that can be borrowed at any point in time. Again, we see this applied differently in many different African countries. And also the problem with this one is that sometimes they will make it, that some countries will make it, put it in their secondary legislation, which is easier to amend, and then every year we'll see an amendment going through Parliament that we are increasing the debt restriction, which is not helping us in any way. And again, it talks to the issues of governance. Is it good governance to be doing that, especially if you know that the country will not be able to pay the debt? Disclosure requirements are very important. My colleagues will talk to you about issues of observatory data. There is very important. Who do you need to disclose to and why? Disclosure is very important for accountability purposes. You need to account whether to Parliament, whether to ordinary people on the ground. People need to know why the country is borrowing and what those money will be used for. So disclosure is also very important. Another thing that I want to talk about is the designated public debt management law. Some countries are saying that, or some people are saying that for governance to be intact, we need to have public debt management laws. Other schools of thought says that as long as it's in the public debt management issues are covered in the Public Finance Act, everything will be fine. But I think the point that we want to say here is that as long as all the required controls are in place, whether you have a public debt management law or you have a public finance management law, what will suffice is for the controls to be in place. And then the other issue that the study also looks at briefly is the issue of institutional framework. We need to have debt management offices that have the proper internal controls, demarcated front office and back office, which I must say in most of the African countries is still a dream. So we also need to, African countries also need to be looking at making sure that their debt management offices are capacitated enough, even in terms of the resources that are there. Debt management advisory is also very important. This is to give credibility to the debt management process, to ensure that whatever person or office that has been given the opportunity to contract debt on behalf of government is doing that after being advised appropriately. Okay, the key findings that come out of this study is that legal framework in most African countries is not comprehensive enough. And that is why in some countries we see a lot of debt sustainability problems coming in, because we don't have the watertight legal framework. And we also found that in other instances where the framework is there is a lot of non-compliance to the legal requirements. I've given an example of the debt limit earlier on, that sometimes the debt limit will be there, but you will see countries borrowing beyond what the debt limit says. We have also seen a lot of countries not complying to the disclosure requirement. You are supposed to issue debt statistics every 6 months, and you choose to do that every 12 months, or you don't do it at all. So these are the things that we see on the ground. Public debt also is not defined in most of the laws, and this, in most countries, in most of the countries that we observed this practice, it has brought the country into a lot of problems. You need to define debt in terms of what is public debt. Does it include even the local government debt? Does it include guarantees? All those things need to be defined so that when you say public debt, we know exactly where the government will be held responsible. And then the issue of the purpose of borrowing, we also realize that some countries did not prescribe the purpose of borrowing, and as a result, Whoever is sitting in the office will borrow according to, I don't know what I'll say. The issue, the problem that we saw regarding this is in Zambia. I'm not sure whether you are aware of the Zambian issues now, and also in Mozambique, where the prescription in terms of what are you borrowing for did not come out very clear. Debt disclosures are also very inadequate, and because of inadequacy in debt disclosure, there is a feeling that some governments might be hiding their level of debt and not disclosing fully what their level of debt is. And then the recommendation that came out of those findings was that we need to revise the debt management framework to make sure that all the required controls that are needed are in place. We also, another controversial one, we also need to introduce the sanctions. These are the sanctions that the way we are proposing them should not even go to an office but to an individual who have knowingly acted against what is in the law. There is a case that was going on in Mozambique a couple of months ago, where the courts ended up ruling that government is not liable for the debt because somebody was acting outside the law. But what we are proposing, for it to be deterrent enough, whoever that have acted should also be held responsible. We also need to make it a habit to do self-assessments on our own. Like I've mentioned earlier on, we have the Aphrodite Borrowing Charter, which can assist us to put in place the assessment criteria, so that as a country, at least you know where you should focus in terms of making the reforms. The World Bank has also come up with a tool called the DEMPA, where they assess countries on a need basis. What we have also found up that is that the countries normally don't follow up on the assessments results. So you'll find that the report come out today. In 5 years' time, we're still talking about the same issues. So really, it doesn't help. It needs to be a self-inflicted process, whereby we are motivated to close the gaps that we have in our debt management practices. The last one, which my colleagues will talk about, is the issue of establishment of the debt observatory. And this one will also help in terms of transparency, in terms of standardizing the data for decision-making process. And as I mentioned, my colleagues will talk about it in details.